be a matter of discrimination. He's referring to an example about the Southeast, and it's not only Southeast. It even happened in the Southwest and also in some states in the North, especially when states were created. You find Imo State divided into Imo and Ebonyi. Then you have scuffles about civil servants. It happened between Oyo and Osun State. It happened between Kaduna and Katsina State. Bauchi and Gombe. So what he's saying is that hard work must be rewarded irrespective of the person who is delivering it. And that's the sample for our leaders.
Okay, Bayo, thank you so much for your input this morning. It's a pleasure having you as always. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll begin our conversation.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support, yes, by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youth, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
The second wave of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is upon us.
To safeguard lives of our people, government has signed the health protection regulations, which makes wearing a face mask mandatory in public places.
Wear a mask. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Wash your hands regularly with soap and clean water. And use hand sanitizer.
COVID-19 is real. Do not be infected. Do not spread it. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
You're welcome back, and to begin our conversation, let's take this background report by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
The law binds every individual in the society, and as such, it draws the line between the right and wrong, good or bad, with appropriate punishment spelled out for violators. Based on this, every society promulgates its law guiding it in order to ensure safety and peaceful cohabitation. Despite these laws on ground and the ground norm, which is the 1999 Constitution as amended, the society of today is still faced with a lot of unlawful activities. These include maiming, kidnapping, corruption, terrorism, cultism, drug abuse and illicit drug trafficking, amongst others, with the perpetrators in some cases walking freely on the streets without appropriate punishments meted out to them. This lack of enforcement of the laws some key players in the administration of criminal justice said contributes to the rising crime rates in the country. Some security agencies have raised concerns as to silence of the people in identifying the criminal-minded elements amongst them, and this makes enforcement and investigations difficult, especially when the suspect is a known person to them or even their relatives. Experts identified a number of challenges militating against enforcement of the laws, to include inadequate manpower, institutional weaknesses, inadequate equipment, corruption, amongst others. What steps should be taken to ensure full enforcement of the laws? What synergy is needed amongst critical stakeholders in the criminal justice administration to achieve this? These are some of the issues guests already seated will be talking about soon.
Thank you, Oyemi Ajayi, for that pointed background. With us in the studios now to discuss the subject matter in greater detail, let's welcome our regular guests. Professor Oserebe Osumbo is a professor of law, former governor of Edo State, two-time senator, and also former chairman of the Nigeria Law Reform Commission. Prof, pleasure to have you this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Also here with us in the studios, we would like to welcome retired Inspector General of Police, Suleiman Abba. He is, of course, now the chairman, board of trustees of the Nigeria Police Trust Fund. He's also a lawyer. Retired IGP, delighted to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
We also would like to introduce Adap Sontanimu, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Nasarawa State. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin the conversation this way. You listened, of course, to the background. It is often said, and sometimes it's become a common refrain, that our problem is not one of laws, but one of implementation, or one of enforcement. And a number of persons have drawn attention to some of the very heinous criminal activities we are dealing with today. Banditry, kidnapping for ransom, terrorism, and many more. And the argument is that if these had been nipped in the bud, as the saying also goes, through rigorous law enforcement, we might not be where we are today, to a large extent. Gentlemen, let's have your initial thoughts on this. Why are we grappling with law enforcement that makes us sometimes look like a lawless environment? Professor Osumbo.
Well, given the background report that we listened to, there are serious issues with respect to the efficient enforcement of the law. I would say there is a degree of enforcement. I don't think there is a total lack of enforcement, but the level is not up to what is to be desired. And as you rightly said, many people express the view that the problems of Nigeria are not really the issue of adequacy, the presence of the laws. The laws are there, but the problem is the judicious and efficient enforcement of those laws. And this is not just restricted to the realm of criminal law, because what I believe the background report focuses on is enforcement of the criminal aspects of the law. But the poor enforcement of laws is something that is a phenomenon that we are trying to grapple with in this country. To be able to enforce the law, first of all, there has to be the law, which is up to date, which is intended to respond to the needs of society, and to be reviewed and updated from time to time so that it keeps in step with the dynamics of society. Those laws need to be in the area of criminal law. When there is a breach, it has to be investigated. And essentially, the law enforcement agencies, starting with the police, and in recent years, we've had the EFCC, DSS, and so forth and so on. But for them to be able to do their work efficiently as well, they have to have the manpower, trained and equipped manpower, modern instruments and gadgets for processing the suspects and whatever they are supposed to have done, up to the arraignment in court, the process of arrest, trial, conviction, sentencing in court. They all have to be correct. So where there is a lack at any of these points, then the problem of inadequate enforcement of the law manifests. And the public justifiably feel that the system is not working properly as it should be, particularly in comparison to other countries. But again, talking about other countries, it's good to bear in mind too that there is no country that is totally crime-free. Even the most advanced countries also grapple with their own problems of criminality. But what is important is the sincerity, the determination of the actors, key actors in the administration of criminal justice system in ensuring that the laws are properly enforced. Because after all, that is why society, modern society, can develop, can thrive. That is what separates modern society from a society in a state of nature, which Thomas Hobbes characterized as being brutish, nasty, and short. So if we are to be able to organize ourselves in a decent society, in a civilized manner, in which people can live decent lives, then it is imperative that the law has to be judiciously applied. So that, for instance, where government makes provisions, budgetary provisions to alleviate the sufferings, to make life meaningful for people, nobody is stealing the money, for instance. And if anybody does that, they have to pay for it. They have to go through the process of trial and conviction. But let me quickly say as a rider that again, when people see those that they believe have committed offenses getting off the hook, it is also because sometimes, not all the time, the factors have been mentioned. Sometimes it is because the legal process has not been fully complied with. Because again, the law states that everybody must receive a fair trial. And in the process of ensuring fair trial, you must go through the procedure laid down in the law. So for instance, you catch somebody with some weed, and he tells you, this weed with me is Indian hemp. And everybody there hears him saying that what he has is Indian hemp, and they expect him to be punished. But the law expects that that weed has to be subjected to forensic examination and test to confirm that it is cannabis sativa. It may be pawpaw leaves that somebody ground and gave him, and he thought it is Indian hemp. So it is necessary that for you to convict somebody, you go through the entire process established by law.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Osumbo. Retired IGP Suleiman Abba, can you respond to the questions that Kinsley asked earlier?
I think, first and foremost, I have to admit that it's a very important question, and it's a very important issue we are discussing to the society, to the nation, and to mankind generally. I think we need to realize the fact that there is no society that does not have problems of insecurity. But what is important is what are the mitigating factors or efforts, in arresting that situation. I think that is where we are playing, or what we are playing with in Nigeria. Now, if law enforcement is one of the mitigating efforts in arresting insecurity or in solving insecurity issues in society,
then it means we have to take law enforcement agencies seriously. And I think that is where we are having problem. One, the background of the law enforcement agencies has caused a lot of problems that are still unresolved. The colonial hangovers are still there. People still see law enforcement agencies as enemies. They don't collaborate with them. They despise them. And even the government does not take, them as frontliners in the efforts to solve the insecurity problems. And I think in this case, arresting the problems of crime. If, for example, the leading agency in law enforcement, the Nigeria Police, is still grappling with insufficient funding, insufficient manpower, ineffective equipment, and properly trained, personnel, then it means we are not taking law enforcement seriously. And a good example is the way even the police stations are cited, even in the most visible part of the cities. Let's take example in the airports. In almost all our international airports, the police are living in either containers or porta cabin outside the main building itself. And I'm sure those who built the airport must have built it with police stations enclosed. But because we don't take law enforcement seriously, that means we are playing with the palliative of, solving the problem of insecurity. And that is why we are where we are.
IGP Suleiman Abba, thank you very much. Excuse me. You were talking about the, as an example, the location of police stations near airports. What immediately came to mind for me is a police post near the local wing of Murtala Muhammad Airport. If you are coming from Mobolaji Bank Anthony Way, yes, just before you get it out to the General Aviation Terminal, or you go to MM2, there is a filling station there. Everybody knows that filling station. That building has been there for I don't know how many decades. It's a rotten structure, and I do hope that some attention is paid to that particular structure. It looks like some prefabricated structure that we have seen there for so many years. All right, thanks a lot, IGP. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Adab Singh Tanimu, former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Nasarawa State. Let's have your opening salvo on this subject matter that makes it appear that impunity reigns in the country. People just tell you, whether it's insecurity or some other things, that nothing will happen. So commit the offense and you get away with your impunity. Why are we so?
Thank you very much. The challenges of law enforcement are issues that we have to look into it seriously. Since the Constitution provided clearly that the primary purpose of government is to provide security and welfare of its people. Where you don't have security, even if government provides welfare, it is meaningless. And this security cannot be attained without obedience to lawful orders. And therefore, those laws made need to be enforced so as to provide the necessary security that people will at least enjoy whatever welfare packages are provided by the government. But the situation, just as we say we're having challenges, it is something that is common. And I want to look at it from the side that the society also should be dynamic. The dynamism in the sense that we cannot use the old method or the archaic situation of fighting crimes in the 18th century and want to apply it to the 21st century method. And that is why sometimes when you go to police stations, you find out that if you look at the crop of people, just as IGP Suleiman rightly said, you still have these relics of colonial background, in the sense that the earlier police formations that were introduced in 1861, 1970, and so on, especially the origin of the police, the colonial masters brought them in order to protect their interests, their territorial interests, their economic interests, and other strategic reasons. And therefore, this has grown up to the extent that the training that people still receive has relation to do with those aspects. And that is why, if you look at it, the rules of engagement that are supposed to come up now in the modern society are no longer the issues at hand. Instead of you to engage a criminal in the sense that you'll be able to draw him closer to you as a friend so that you can extract what you want to get from him, before you even see him, you have adjudged him guilty. If you have your way, you will even eliminate him. If you have your way, you will molest him. You use excessive force on him. In fact, some of these violent crimes, banditry, and all these Boko Haram, if you look at it from the beginning, you discover that perhaps at the time some people were arrested, if they were given the opportunity to at least explain the background why they had to go into some aspect of what they were doing, would have been able to unravel some of the problems that happened. But you arrest him and you kill him. It becomes a problem. Instead of killing the matter, you have only scratched it. You have scorched the snake, and it will come back again and become another big issue. And that is why this issue had even resulted in the area of the excessive force that most of our policemen are using, or law enforcement agencies. You find law enforcement agencies, instead of using the modern approach, you go back, you want to hit the person. That's what has brought about the issue of these NSAS. Because a lot of them have been complaining about excessive force, accidental discharges, and all other things that have come up perhaps from lack of training. Some of them who are even there don't even know where their right starts and the other person's right, their right stops and the other person's right starts. And therefore you engage them, go and coil this crime, it becomes a problem. Another issue is that there are plethora of laws. State laws are conflicting with federal laws. Sometimes the law enforcement agents find it difficult. Which one do you really obey? Which one do you disregard? You find a situation whereby you see a duplication of all these police of security outfits. They say civil defense is to go into issue of petroleum pipeline and all of that. Does it mean that if a policeman sees somebody tampering with petroleum pipeline products or committing a crime, what will he do? And that is why in some cases we discover that these issues have become so intractable that the security men are also not in a position to actually understand which way to follow. Now take another example, just as you said about issue of nepotism. It is not only nepotism or issue of there's nothing that can happen to me.
Impunity.
Impunity. The impunity has become the order of the day. That is why everybody who is a criminal tries to find a way of reaching out to somebody that is big in the society. When he commits the crime, he gets some small returns, give to the man who is in the Home of Affairs. When a thing happens, he sent him a call. Oh, sorry, there is order from above. Which order from above? Where is the order coming from? It's coming from somebody who is well-to-do in the society. That man should not be treated that way. He should be given some this thing. I vouch for him. He's my close brother. I know he will not do that. Allow the law to take its course. And that is why when such people come back, they say, you don't know that we are untouchables. Who will try us? Nobody can do anything to us. And then you discover that people who have tried to enforce the law now become enemies of such people. At the end of the day, they try. That is why in most cases you discover that people don't want to give useful information. There is no crime that can be fought without intelligence. Why do you go out to give necessary information to disclose some of the issues that are, the burning issues that are affecting crimes in your area and criminality, when you know that somebody will go there and then disclose your identity, or somebody will go there and send an order from above that this is the issue? And important too is the issue of command theory. The command theory that we have in terms of fighting crime is very, very awkward. It's very, very awkward. you have to take order from this man, you have to take order from that man, you have to take order from this man, you have to take order from, before the action is done. The governor at the state, he's sometimes at sea. He doesn't know what to do because lawful orders will only be given by the Inspector General of Police to the Commissioner of Police in the state. And the governor is helpless. Now take a situation whereby a crime is being committed and the state we have in this democratic setting is a different party from the one at the center. And then the IG has not given the police commissioner the order. Or the IG will say the president has not directed him as required by the Constitution. What happens? Lawlessness persists. And if it persists, what do? You then discover that law enforcement itself has become a problem. Then the other aspect of it is that even our laws themselves sometimes give room for this aspect of unenforceability or the challenges on enforcement. The National Assembly has a lot to do, and the State Assembly too. The situation whereby people pass laws, and then in enacting these laws, you have hidden agenda or interest in them that you want to protect. A law that was passed in 1803, you are enacting it again in the year 2021 because you feel that the colonial masters that time were enacting that law because they wanted to protect their interests. So you feel that that law should also be dusted and then given a different coloration, and then you now enact the same law and you want people to obey the same law. For goodness sake, how would that happen? Look at issues that are happening of this unrest. You give people power to elect or select, then you come back, you say, no, you are the one that will select. Then what about those contradictions? Where will you talk about the enforcement? Which one will the law enforcement agencies go for? Is it for the ones that are proper or for the ones that are not right? Now, that is why in this situation, we have to sit down. The issue of law enforcement is a responsibility of government, the people, the law enforcement agencies, especially too, the National Assemblies, and the need for us to reform our laws in order to meet up with the expectation of the present time. Thank you very much.
Professor Osumbo, you've heard from them. You sort of raised the bar when you started the discussion. You talked about sincerity, determination of key actors in enforcing the laws in Nigeria. What are the challenges mitigating against such in this country?
Well, in the discussions that have taken place so far, the role of the police has been clearly identified as the lead agent in the enforcement of our laws. And that is rightly so, because the other agencies, their mandate is limited, like EFCC, just economic crimes and so forth. But the serious crimes like this, insecurity, kidnapping, that have blighted our society in recent years are really the responsibility of the police. Which brings to mind some of the needs of the police. Former IG Suleiman Abbas mentioned funding, equipment, and so forth and so on. But I want to bring in at this stage the issue of decentralization of the police. People have been talking about that for a very long time. It seems that the police, the Nigeria police, is being overwhelmed. I think there's very little to doubt in that. Very few people will argue with the fact that they are having so much challenges as one single police. And Nigeria being a federation, we ought also to devolve policing to states. Because many of the laws we are talking about, whether it's kidnapping, armed robbery, are state offenses. They are state offenses, not federal offenses. There are federal offenses like EFCC Act, offenses against currency, all those are federal offenses. But stealing, kidnapping, robbery, ritual murders, and all those kind of crimes that plague Nigeria society today are state offenses created by the state houses of assembly. And the states have jurisdiction over such matters, not federal. So it makes sense, therefore, that a state that has created these offenses to have the police to enforce its laws and have the Nigeria police concentrate on federal offenses. I think the time has come for us to look at that. And I was a member of the APC Committee on True Federalism, and there were a number of issues we recognized for purposes of devolution, that this can be easily devolved from the exclusive legislative list to the states for better governance in Nigeria, because we are being overwhelmed by these problems, and there seem to be clear solutions to some of these difficulties. Why can't we take the next step to try this? Our constitution was borrowed from the US. Everybody knows that. In the US, you have federal police, you have state police, you have county police responsible for various levels of crimes. But if it is across border, maybe an offense taking place in more than one state, of course the federal FBI steps in. We can do the same kind of thing in Nigeria. And by doing that, we will be addressing some of these challenges like funding. I was discussing with a state governor, this issue of whether states, because the argument against state police is that some states cannot even pay salaries of civil servants. And why do you now want to add police to their burden? And civil servants, if you don't pay them, all they can do is to carry placard and demonstrate on the street. But if you don't pay police and they have guns, then you are caught in trouble. Yeah. The police, he would rather use his gun to take care of his problems rather than carrying a placard. So there's a danger there. But all said and done, many governors opine that even as it is now, they spend a lot on the federal police, on the Nigeria police. They buy cars for them, they buy equipment for them, and they give them sundry kind of assistance, even welfare. I know that governors do that. Even as a former governor, I know that I contributed towards assisting the police to be better able to do their job in the interest of the state. So I think the time has come for us to look at this state police, and by so doing, we'll be able to solve some of the challenges, as I said before, the funding, procurement of equipment, training, rather than saddle the federal government with this responsibility. It's a leeway that is available, as they say, a low-hanging fruit that we can pluck in order to rid ourselves of some of these criminalities that seem to be overwhelming the Nigeria Police Force and other law enforcement agencies.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Osumbo. IGP Suleiman Abba, while we are waiting the constitutional amendments for the creation of state police, the reality that we face today, part of what Adapson has also talked about, is the so-called command theory. For us civilians, it is often said, obey the last command. There appear to be many instances where a law enforcement officer who is in charge in that particular jurisdiction receives again the so-called orders from above. Release this person, don't do this, don't do that. So that when you are on a case or when you are on a matter that will ordinarily, if successfully prosecuted, should serve as a deterrence, you have this overbearing intrusion from above. You can call it political interference, even though in issues of politics you can also deal with that. Why do we appear to have that rather frequently in our system, whereas in some other jurisdictions it is said that you are unlikely to have such interference, and that for a command to be obeyed it must be lawful. But if a command is to the extent to say, look, release a suspect who prima facie has committed an offense, then it will be an issue that the entire system, of course, will be shaken to its foundations.
Well, let me give you a little background of what the regulation says about command, that's with regards to carrying out order, and also the issue of responsibility. First and foremost, by the regulations, every police officer is responsible for his actions. It is not same as what happens in the military, where loyalty is number one. Order, loyalty is number one. No, in the police, it is expected that as an individual police officer, you use your discretion in the discharge of your responsibilities. And that is because it is assumed that you are trained enough to use your discretion properly. Because for every of your actions, you alone will be responsible. There is nothing like my Oga gave me order to shoot somebody and you shot him. Yes, in the at the instances of, let's say, riots and so on, where the mobile police, which I have served for 6 years, the unit commander can come point at you and say, shoot at the leg of that one wearing red shirt, and you shoot him. But he will never tell you shoot at his head. So the discretion of the police officer is very, very important. What has gone wrong is the fact that internally the command structure has been polluted, one by the officers themselves, a situation where promotions are done in corrupt manner. A junior officer can be promoted 2 to 3 times ahead of his colleagues. Now, what do you expect? The officer that favors his cronies certainly can give unlawful orders and the junior officer carries it out. Similarly, if political office holders will influence the leadership to get their boys, whether escort, whether aide-de-camps, or so, promoted when they are not due, or even twice within a year or within 2 years, or at least 2 to 3 times ahead of their colleagues, it's an indication that things have gone wrong. And that is why the issue of, the command structure is shaking. The best way to go about it is for a leader, to be upright, to be, to protect everyone under him. And it's only in the police will someone be promoted twice in a special consideration in his career. It's only in the police. And I think the earlier it is not only stopped, the earlier it is reversed, the better.
Wow.
Do you think that is possible?
Absolutely. Nothing is impossible. Okay. It's only those that are not serving, they can get away with it, but all those serving can be reversed. What is wrong if they go with their colleagues? That's what we see in the military. In the military, if you give somebody special promotion, he won't even take it because his colleagues will deal with him. But a situation where you are an assistant inspector general of police and your colleagues are assistant commissioners of police, how do you expect sanity in the system? That is why command structure is shaken. So and unless we correct it or unless we stop it, we'll continue to have problems.
So corruption is doing more harm to law enforcement in this country?
Absolutely. Corruption in the society is doing a lot of harm to law enforcement agencies, and also corruption within the system itself is also doing a lot of harm to itself. That's the situation. And the only way to stop corruption in the system, in law enforcement agencies, in that system, is for the society to stop corrupting them.
IGP Suleiman Abba, thank you very much there for your opinion. Let's bring in again Adapsin Tanimo. Now, the Office of Attorney General of a state or of the Federation is specifically provided for in the Constitution. And the Office of the Attorney General is that of the chief law officer of a state or of the federation. And ordinarily, the powers of the Attorney General of a state or of the federation are not subject to political control. Namely, that the Attorney General should not take or is not expected to take instructions from a governor or the president while performing his duties as Attorney General of the federation. So that if you are prosecuting a case or you want to discontinue the prosecution of a case or you want to take over a case, it is based purely on professional advice from within the team of the Attorney General, including the DPP and all others, of course, who are at the disposal of the Attorney General at the state or at the federal level, for you to proceed. But it would appear that this isn't the case, and some persons would argue that that's part of the reason we're having challenges of law enforcement. What is your opinion?
Thank you very much. To a larger extent, the ideal situation will have been that we separate the office of the Honorable Attorney General from the office of a Minister for Justice or Commissioner for Justice. In those days, in the colonial period, the Attorney Generals were seen as those people who are above board. And therefore, they owe the society that responsibility to do that which is morally right, legally right, and also within the public perception. You believe that that is what the law had provided. But a situation whereby in the 1999 Constitution, you have the office of the Honorable Commissioner for Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, you are now mixing the professional aspect and the political aspect together. And in terms of appointment, it is the governor that appoints or nominates the commissioner, or the president nominates the minister, sends his or her name to the State Assembly or to the National Assembly. After clearing the name, then you are being sworn in. After being sworn in, you are expected to perform your duties. It is true. You have prerogative of mercy committees and other committees that you have to work hand in hand with them in order to do justice according to the rules. But the situation is that it is always often said that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. Being partly a political appointee, you cannot at least divorce yourself completely from political influence, because the governor will not appoint anybody or nominate anybody that he from nowhere. He must look for somebody who is his confidant or somebody he knows at least he can work together with him. And therefore, that is why in some cases, you have a situation whereby if the Attorney General tries to be very, very strict, the next thing they do is to sideline you. You'll be sitting in the office, you will see papers flying and happening, you will know what is happening. And in most cases, you discover that to avoid such conflicts with your chief executives, what you need to do is, like during our time, we resort to communications through the files. If he tells you to do something that you feel is morally right or wrong, you need to communicate to him to seek for his approval. And we have done that many times. You will discover that, Your Excellency, you may wish to approve what you have told me to do. If he gives you the approval, then whatever happens, it is his problem. But in most cases, when the chief executive discovers that you are becoming too clever, the next thing they do is to send you away. And then when they send you away, your people will start complaining. You represent our interests from this particular community. You have gone there, we have now created a vacuum. You don't know that this is what it takes to be Attorney General or to do this political job. Why will you be fighting your governor? But they will not want to know what are actually the nitty-gritties of all that has happened. And that is why in most cases you discover that the more you have your principles, once you get there, you discover that if you are not careful, you'll be carried away. The torrent or the undercurrent of the office will take you away. And that is why we are advocating, if it is possible, let's separate these two offices. find a way of appointing the Honorable Attorney General. Then find a way of getting who is the commissioner or minister. If you're a commissioner, you know that yes, you are there commissioned as a political appointee. If you are a Honorable Attorney General, you know that yes, it's by virtue of your profession and the age at the bar that you have become the Honorable Attorney General, and you owe it a duty to protect that image that you have, so that at the end of the day, you'll be able to discharge your duties without fear or favor. And that is why in most cases, some issues that you have rightly raised on the issue of impunity, the offices are also involved. You enter a case of nolli prosecute on an issue that is glaringly wrong. But because the order has come, or your chief executive have told that no, that issue, we have interest in it, we cannot proceed with it. And then how do you expect the society to look at you? And that is why sometimes this law enforcement has become a problem. A high-profile case that is supposed to be prosecuted to serve as deterrence to other ones is now being discontinued. On what grounds? You are not bound to give any explanation. And that is the other aspect of the law that perhaps we have to look into it very well.
Okay, Mr. Adapson, you've raised some pertinent questions, and I'll now come to Professor Osumbo. You were a chief executive officer yourself. What kind of relationship? He described the relationship that works at times and it doesn't work at times. What was your experience with your Attorney General when you were in office?
Well, let me say I had 16 commissioners. And because of the situation, peculiar situation in Edo State at that time, I could only appoint 2. I was only allowed to appoint 2 commissioners.
By who? By the powers that be.
And those were the Attorney General,
yes,
and the Women Affairs Commissioner. Women Affairs Commissioner, that the First Lady, my wife, had to nominate somebody she could work with, so that there's no crisis between Commissioner of Women Affairs and the wife of the governor.
Office, yeah, okay.
And so I actually appointed only the Attorney General nominated. Because in my case, he was somebody that I knew very well. He was my student in the university. He was very intelligent as a student. And he had done so well. He was already a senior advocate of Nigeria. So I had confidence in him, and I appointed him. And he performed to my satisfaction very diligently. Well, so it is to be expected that the chief executive, because it's a political office, anyway, the office of governor, and it involves a lot of political interest. And also, even from what happened recently in the US, you cannot completely rule out the chief executive or that president or governor being able to take certain decisions based on political interest. That is why Trump was pardoning people with serious offenses, and those were due to political considerations. But it should not be abused. This thing in life is too much of everything that is bad. When you take it to a ridiculous level and it becomes repeated, then people will begin to raise eyebrows. So that is my own personal experience. But I want to emphasize the point which he also made, that for a long time, people have been talking about the need to separate the office of the Commissioner for Justice and the Attorney General in the state, and Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation. I think that the 2 offices can be conveniently separated. The responsibilities of the offices can be distinct and separate. And in order that the Attorney General will be a completely professional person rather than a politician. Of course, the process of his appointment would also ensure that he's independent and professional. Just the way, with some measure of security of tenure, the way you have, for instance, the Auditor General of the Federation. He enjoys tenure. He cannot be sacked easily, except maybe on the 2/3 majority vote of the Senate. So the Attorney General will have his tenure protected by the Constitution, but the Minister of Justice is a political appointee and can be removed at any time. Ditto for the situation in the state. This is also part of the recommendations which I am sure are before the National Assembly in the ongoing Constitution amendment exercise. Just like similar to it is the office of Accountant General of the Federation and Accountant General of the Federal Government. You know, as of now, Accountant General of the Federation performs both the function of the Federation and the function of the Federal Government of Nigeria. So these recommendations are not strange to the National Assembly, and I do hope that they will take action on them at the earliest possible opportunity, because there's huge merit in these recommendations. But let me say again what has emerged from the contributions of my two other colleagues is that some of the problems we are talking about is due to, can I say, culture or the wrong perception of Nigerians about democracy generally, and also about public office, the value system, the expectation, you know, I just call it culture, use the word culture to cover all these things. And he said, for instance, the former Attorney General of Nasarawa State, that if you do not play along with your appointer, with the governor, and you are sacked, your people back home will crucify you. That they had opportunity to have somebody and you messed up. You were fighting. So rather than for them to appreciate the reason for you to disagree, nobody will take that at the level of the politicians in your own place. So we need to reach that level where people will understand some of these issues. Then I talked about perception about democracy. Because with due sense of responsibility, some of these things are not as pronounced under the military rule as under civilian dispensation. Exactly. Because discipline is more strongly enforced under the military. But in a democracy, people believe, oh, it's political. Yes. Even when they kill, they say, oh, it's political. When you commit any offense in politics, nothing happens to you. And particularly if you happen to belong to the governing party at that level, whether it is the state or whatever, they believe that you can always even decamp. Once you decamp, you may find that
your sins are forgiven.
So these are some of the peculiarities of under the democratic dispensation. Yeah. But through education, through enlightenment program of this sort, we begin to change the narrative. And then finally, on this point, I believe that political office holders have a duty to acquaint themselves with the Constitution, first of all, and then the laws generally. I know everybody cannot be a lawyer, but there are certain basic things that you are expected to know as a governor. And I would want a situation, I know at the National Assembly level, they organize retreat for members elect. And I do, as a former, when I was a governor, a retreat was organized for governors within a few months. That governors, this class of people, should be familiar with the Constitution. Give them, in fact, I ensured that at the National, because I was a facilitator at the retreat of the current 9th National Assembly, that they all have copies of the Constitution. In fact, I also ensured that they have some very important decisions of courts. For instance, establishing the relationship between the various tiers of government, between the federal, the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly. There are decisions of courts that have established this. Once they familiarize themselves with these decisions, with these basic tools, then some of the difficulties, frictions, crises that we have had can be avoided. The same thing with governors. They should familiarize themselves. Sometimes I begin to wonder whether some governors, with due respect, are familiar with these basic issues in the Constitution and in the laws. Sometimes I get the impression that they don't even have a clue as to what the law provides on this specific matter. So the solution is to continue to educate people, continue to enlighten people, and of course enforce the law, because through enforcement and punishment of offenders, a deterrence will be created and other people will learn from the mistakes of others and the punishments that they have suffered.
Professor Osumbo, thank you very much. IGP Suleiman Abba, let's come back to this broader issue of having untouchables in our society. Yes, Section 308 provides for the immunity of only 74 persons while they are in office: President, Vice President, 36 state governors, and their deputies. But I don't want to sound ridiculous, but it would appear that there are many more persons who are covered by that provision that are not so stated clearly in the provision, which is why you have a number of untouchables, which is why you have persons who apparently, on the face of it, commit offenses and then they go scot-free. Now, this whole issue of interference is what, of course, the other two speakers have been talking about. Let's set an example, because the example of the U.S. was also given a while ago by Professor Osumbo when he was talking about how former President Trump, was exercising his prerogative of mercy by dishing out pardons on a political basis. But we do know that arising from the presidential election of last November, President Trump is reported to have been calling the Secretary of State of Georgia to fiddle with the outcome of that election. And those conversations have been recorded. And those conversations are also now forming part of the case file for possible criminal prosecution. To say you are seeking to tamper with the authority of the Secretary of State to commit an offense, which is to say, rework an election and so on and so forth. But again, part of what we have, we've talked about the powers of the Attorney General of the Federation and how those powers, constitutional powers, by the way, have been diluted through political interference. For law enforcement officers, say a commissioner of police, it would appear to be even more rampant. It is not just the governor who will call you, it is the political leaders in that particular state or those who are in Abuja will call you to say when there are electoral offenses, when people are killed during elections, murder. They will say, look, release that person. How much of a hindrance is this to efficient and effective law enforcement in our country?
Let me first and foremost admit to the fact that, yes, interferences do happen, interferences with criminal matters, interferences with political matters do happen where, as a commissioner of police, I was a commissioner of police in Rivers, for example, and during the 2011 national elections, I was also commissioner of police in Lagos for the election period, 6 weeks. And let me also say that it is the discretion, it is at the discretion of the officer, whether commissioner of police or inspector general of police, to decide whether he is right in obeying the orders, particularly if these orders are erroneous, unpatriotic. And if he obeys such orders, like I said earlier on, if for any reason the law is going to take its course, you will be solely held responsible for carrying out those orders. And that is why I would want to say that if we are going for state police, let's start with local government police, which the governors destroyed. Authority at the local level is more important to me than any other place, because these local levels, they are all over the place. And we all know what happened, how they got destroyed, and why they are destroyed. In fact, as it is today, we are grappling with the fact that local governments should be allowed to spend their money. but you know who takes and controls the fund. And that is why even the insecurity problem or situation we have at hand is because there isn't anything a local government chairman or a traditional ruler can do because he's incapacitated, he doesn't have the funding to do it. They all have to go to the governor at the headquarters or at the capital level. So if we are going to have state police, let's start with local government police. And believe you me, far back in 2009, in my research at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, I recommended that we should have local government police. Look at what is happening. Look at what happened in Imo just 2 days ago. Imagine if it were state police. Look at what happened in Oyo recently. Imagine what would have happened if it were state police. Let's start from the local government level. At the local level, surprisingly, we don't even have these ethno-religious biases. People have learned to live together and they work together. So coming back to the issue of interferences, when I was Commissioner of Police in Rivers, it depends on who is the political office holder. And I'm not being partisan by it. Rotimi Amechi, when he was the governor, he never interfered with criminal matters or the activities of the command, except for him to call and say, I hear that so-so person who killed so-so-so and so, people are struggling to get him on bail. Please don't give bail. This I'm saying, God hears me, God sees me. This is what he used to do. So it depends on the political office holder. Interferences. And it also depends on the officer, whether he takes the orders or not. I give you an example also as Commissioner of Police in Lagos. During the 2011 elections, the son of an ambassador contesting for election, seeing that he was going to lose the election, he went to the coalition center and wanted to disrupt it. And he was from the ruling party at the center. I told the DPO, arrest him. He was arrested. I called the Inspector General of Police, Hafiz Ringim, and told him, I have arrested a PDP man who wanted to cause trouble. He says, you are the person on ground. So that's the kind of protection that, every officer would want to have. And I detained him until the results were released, then I released him.
Did he win?
He lost. Obviously, he lost. He lost. And you also what happened at the national level too, 2015. When all efforts for us to give, or for the police to give the cooperation for, the results to be disrupted was not given. You saw how a senior political office holder went to the venue, the coalition center, to disrupt it. And we controlled it. So it depends on the person on ground, and it also depends on the political office holder who is giving the orders. But I want to lay the blame more on the officer who carries out unlawful orders.
Just before we take this short break, because we have a break, so that when we return, we can take tweets and then some other aspects. What you have just talked about, that's to say responsibility and obedience to lawful orders, is this part of the doctrinal training for police officers, whether as recruits or those who are the academy or the college?
No, the training at the college is for you to use your discretion. Remember, the law says police officer, and a police officer starts from the constable to the Inspector General of Police. So that means you are expected to act as an officer, bearing in mind that you have all the attributes of a police officer. These attributes include the fact that you have full knowledge or reasonable knowledge of the laws, like the prof was talking about with the governors. You have to have knowledge of the laws before you can enforce them. 2, you must have a disabused mind from sentiments either of gender, of tribe, of religion, of state, of region, and so on and so forth. These are the attributes. So because it's expected you have this knowledge and you are educated enough to use your discretion properly, that is why the law will hold you responsible at the, what we call online, when you are doing your patrol, when you are guarding the bank, and so on. When you seize a situation, you should be able to take the necessary immediate actions without even reference to your seniors.
All right, IGP Suleiman Abba, thank you. And gentlemen, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a break now. When we return, we continue with the conversation.
Okay, we have some number of tweets that came in and we're getting them right now. We'll address them and then go back to the conversation. Yes.
Okay, right. So we're just skipping the break.
Yes, we just skipped the break, I think. Yes. Let's now take the tweets that just came in. We have one from Yunus Idris. The challenges of law enforcement agencies is funding, understaffing operational vehicles, low remunerations, etc. I recommend that government should create funding commission to those enforcement agencies just as state fund.
Well, what does it mean by funding commission?
I wonder.
Suleiman Abba, former Inspector General, is chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Police Trust Fund. Yeah. All right, Mike Ayakwo has the next tweet. The challenges of law enforcement are numerous. We're talking of concealment of information by the public when criminals involved are from their villages, lack of equipment, and poor remunerations. Poor morale in the service, where promotions are unfairly done and transfers also used in some cases as punishment. We must sanitize a lot of rots in the whole security outfit in the country.
And Badamasi Haruna Adamu, the challenges of law enforcement in Nigeria are enormous, ranging from welfare of staff, lack of manpower, strong professionalism, to lack of synergy between the agencies, among others. And the solutions to it is the remedy to aforementioned problems.
Now, we have this from B.R. Yakubu. Political will by politicians is the only challenge in enforcing the law. Shall we say lack of political will by politicians is the one challenge in enforcing the law. That's by B.R. Yakubu.
Suleiman Babagana, the bad eggs in the law enforcement are the ones giving bad name to their colleagues, which, if not checked, will lead to loss of trust of the system by the citizenry and abuse of power by law enforcement.
Law Alpha C. Nigeria has many sound laws aimed at ensuring mutual coexistence and general well-being, but inadequate law enforcement and poor remuneration and welfare packages are problems.
And Steve Bond 007, it is due to no political will and a central system that is obsolete. State police is the remedy as security and law enforcement is local.
This is from Festus Akimboewa. There is no doubt that our security agencies are overstretched and struggling to cope with the volume of rising crimes in the country due to lack of adequate funding and investment. Time for state policing. Also, federal government must recruit more officers and invest in technology. Well, you say time for state policing. Suleiman Abba says it is time for local government policing. That's one idea that we'll have to interrogate more deeply.
Yes,
you might take another one from Dele Jack Solomon.
Yeah, Dele Jack Solomon. Despite many attempts by the leadership of the police to enforce discipline and even sack a few bad eggs, improper conduct by the police undermines the ability to fight the pervasive insecurity across the country. As such, Nigeria needs ethical police officers that respect and protect civil rights. The Nigerian police must start acting professionally, competently and responsively as we implore the federal government to equip them adequately and improve their condition of service.
Leo Fadaka, inadequate funding, recruitment method, lack of reliable data, poor training and general welfare are some of the many challenges of law enforcement in Nigeria. Provision of modern digital tools, increase in number and constant retraining would be solutions.
And Ekeji Olagbaju tweets, absolute disregard to the rule of law, respect the rule of law, then we'll all have a better country.
We have this from Mutana Farouk. Good governance itself enforces the law than the law enforcement agents. What people are not willing to do, no gun or amount of intimidation can make them do it. Any society where those who are the helm condone and promote impunity will never be free from anarchy.
Bello Muhammad, corruption is the major challenge in the enforcement of law in Nigeria. Corruption leads to selfishness, greed, and injustice. Remove corruption and Nigeria will be in peace.
Louis, the bridge in the gap of enforcement of the law is, and no, it's not, this is a bit, that would say that the gap in law enforcement was created by our leaders. No crime succeeds in the society if it doesn't have the backing of top-ranking officials. We'll solve this problem once our leaders learn to subject themselves to the law.
Pro Flavio, the numbers of police officers is too small. We need to employ more police officers. The state police will help in the enforcement of the law.
I was just wondering, when we keep talking about inadequate numbers of law enforcement, when you see the many offspring that the Nigeria police has today, we would still be quarreling about the number. NDLA is an outgrowth of the police. EFCC is an outgrowth of the police. Civil defense is also an outgrowth of the police. Road safety is an outgrowth of the police. But more specialized, but still we are having the challenges of law enforcement.